Guru Prakash ji, make yourself visible. Ah,
Amazing.
Are we going ahead and publishing it?
I'm not going to promote it.
there's not much option.
This makes it very real now. We wait for Manu and then we start. Hello and welcome everyone. This is the first episode of the India Dialogue. We're very excited that you're willing to give us a listen. My name is Ruchir. I'm joined by Guru Prakash Paswan, an author, a champion of Dalit rights, and a spokesperson for the BJP. Mitali Mukherjee, besides being a director of journalism at the Reuters Institute, she is well known for her work at CNBC. Manuraj Shanmugan Sundaram, I hope I said that right, or Manu, is not only a successful advocate with his own law practice, but is also a spokesperson for DMK. And I like to believe I am an organization builder. I'm the CEO at Distributed Energy and chair at the School of Policy and Governance. We all know each other from our time at the Australia-India Youth Dialogue. Some of us know each other better than others. We're doing this because we care about India and want to discuss issues in a way that adds value. We're all friends and want to discuss important issues in India, sensitive or not, with friendly disagreements, not without having to shout at each other or live in slogans. For now, this is an experiment that we want to run in the build-up to the 2024 national elections. Maybe we'll continue after, maybe we'll stop, but we want to give this a shot and help unpack important issues for India. Mitali, do you want to add anything?
Well, first, I want to say thank you, Ruchir, for bringing sort of three people with fairly chaotic life schedules together. I think that was a feat in itself. I think it's important, as you outlined, to just sort of put a placeholder on what we are and what we are not, so people who are listening have a sense of what we're looking to do. I think what we're not looking to do is sort of answer the question of, is there enough information out there? And the answer to that is yes. Is really good insight available and accessible? I think the answer to that is perhaps not. Is there space for someone who is a citizen, as you said, but not a news junkie, but who is open to hearing diverse perspectives and is sort of tied in and committed to what the future of India may look like, political, economic, social? That's certainly what we're discussing. And I think I'm really glad you sort of outlined what all of us do, because I think it's not four people sitting in their drawing rooms just having a chat. I think all of us come in with a lot of lived experience of what we feel we see as challenges and opportunities. And of course, I won't let this one go without a quick nod at Guru saying, considering what the government had to say about the think tank CPR, it's interesting that current affairs are now a problem. So I hope it's okay that we discuss current affairs on this podcast and we reasonably disagree about it as well.
Well, Guru, what do you think about the show?
No, I think, Ruchir, thank you so much for, and like as Mitali put it forward very nicely, like among all of us, she at her articulation best, her expression is something which is obviously we all look forward to. But as a platform, it's a very good idea. And there is an appetite, there is a growing interest and appetite for people across the spectrum to listen to dive into some like really informed, unbiased, objective, and dispassionate perspectives, really good information and insights. And I think we might be hitting on the right chord when we say that we are going to speak our minds, we are going to speak based on our lived experiences, as Mitali said, and what exactly is going in the world's largest democracy. And it's a very good time to start this conversation, this podcast. Since 2024, I read it somewhere that 46% of the world population, they are going to vote this year, and this is one of the largest in the history of the humankind after 1800s or something. So major democracies, the largest democracy, India is going to vote. The oldest democracy in the Western academic sense, the United States is going to holds. Obviously, like India lately has been calling itself the mother of democracy because the state to which I belong, Vaishali, the Lichvi Republic, the idea of collective decision making, the idea of consensus building was first sort of historically recorded here. So it's a very interesting time. It's a very interesting occasion, and it's a very interesting platform to sort of come unattached, no strings attached discussion, and putting forward our views and listen to each other, because I very strongly feel that gradually we like to speak, but as a generation, I think, and it has got nothing to do with years, nothing to do with political dispensations, but across the last 25, 30 years, the art of listening is something which has gone down the drain. We are not ready to listen to each other. It's very something which I'm looking forward to, and as an intellectually stimulating and intellectually enriching exercise. Thank you, Ruchir, and thank you, Mitali, and my dear friend Manu to be a part of it.
I
Manu,
want
the
to say
last
a
word.
couple of things. No, I will jump in without any invitation. I think four of us come from four different lived experiences, and if I might say so, from four corners of this great country. Ruchir, of course, is from the western part, and Mitali from the eastern, and Guru and I take care of the north and the south. And I think between the four of us, there is also great respect which we've come to share over the last 6 to 10 years that we've known each other. And I particularly, acknowledge the sweet talk that Guru has already, indulged in with Mitali as soon as he saw her taking pot shots at his government, which is, I think, reflective of the fact that these discussions will be um, embedded with mutual respect, but also defined by articulation and data and a common and shared passion that our country should move forward. And which is another reason why I think we must mention that we've particularly, called this podcast the India Dialogue. Of course, there is a shared Australia-India Youth Dialogue connection, and if I can quickly touch upon that for a moment, the Australia Youth Dialogue, which one of us, Ruchir, co-founded way back when Australia-India relations was at a close to crisis stage, and we used dialogue to sort of build that relation through a uh, track two dialogue. Similarly, or maybe not so similarly, I think today mainstream media and television debates, for all their other pluses, are suffering from a credibility issue. We've seen debates have gone into sort of a a depth that has never been seen before. They are typically devoid of uh, policy discussions or political decorum often. And I think also that the medium of podcast is something that has been particularly underutilized in the Indian context. It is something that I think we all believe has tremendous potential. So I'm glad that we can all make time, and I look forward to using this platform to sort of not just agree but also disagree in the most, I think, respectful and most amicable manner possible.
That was great. Thank you. I'm so excited. I think the challenge is that high quality conversations don't take place. So let's hope that we give the audience something that they are happy to hear on their weekend, that we value their time and unpack issues in a meaningful way. Right. So that's the cue for the first issue, which is the Ayodhya temple. Rituals ahead of the Ram Mandir Pran Pratishtha ceremony in Ayodhya started on the 16th. They'll go on till the 21st. The inauguration will take place on the 22nd of January with the Prime Minister as the chief guest. Preparations have been in full swing, leading to the temple opening with more than 7,000. I think so. I've also read numbers in lakhs, including politicians. I mean, we've been seeing photos of cricketers, industrialists. Let me start by asking Guru. Guru, what do you think the temple opening means both for India and the BJP?
Uh, I think, Ruchir, it's a very nice topic to start with, because it is definitely the flavor of the season, and a lot of people in this country, we believe that it's a culmination of last 500 years of struggle that has uh, happened, and countless sacrifices. If you look at different phases in history, sacrifices has happened over the place of worship. So in a way, Hindu sentiments, and when I say Hindu, I don't particularly refer to a particular religion, but Hinduism as a way of life, and how Hinduism as a faith that is tolerant, that is very amicable to diversity. And I'm reminded of a very interesting quote by our former Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee ji, Bharat Ratna. He once made a very prophetic statement in his classic poetic style. He said, India is secular not because of the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh. India is secular not because of the Bharatiya Janata Party. India is secular because of the Hindus of this country. So, in a way, it's a celebration that is inclusive. It's a celebration that is diverse. It is a celebration that covers everyone regardless of who you are. It's a moment of renaissance. It's a moment of cultural and civilizational renaissance that we are witnessing. And as a generation, we are privileged and fortunate to see this happen. The process, obviously, uh, the struggle was there. It was judicially, because we are a, like mentioned, we are a largest democracy of the world. It was battled on the street, in the courts, and a judicial pronouncement. After thorough judicial process, this decision happened, and the present government has been given this opportunity to deliver the verdict, realizing the verdict. And it's a moment of glory. It's a moment of civilizational oneness, and there is a sense of euphoria. There is a sense of excitement in more than 100 crore Hindus across the world. Like, we are having people from Fiji, people from Mauritius, obviously people from India, and we saw car rallies happening in many countries of Europe as well. And the process is something which we can have a different conversation on, how the process has actually culminated into this. But today, irrespective of caste, creed, religion, region, language, we saw in the last couple of years a Kashi Tamil Sangamam, a Saurashtra Tamil Sangamam. We saw a Sengol in the new parliament building. So, time and again, year by year, we are seeing civilizational oneness, civilizational unity, regardless of caste, regardless of religion, regardless of region. India is one, and India has been one in the process of the consecration of Ram Janmabhoomi Tirth Nyas. Obviously, there are some political overtones to it, not to deny. And again, arguments can be made from both the sides. But for me personally, for us, this is not a matter of politics. This is a matter of faith. This is a matter of civilizational consciousness. And this is a moment to rejoice. This is a moment to have everyone celebrate our culture and civilization, Richard.
Mitali, I mean, Guru is so eloquent. But like, do you think we're moving forward?
Um, Very eloquent. I agree. I think Guru sort of really put it in a very beautiful way. I'm going to apologize right at the start, because I think sort of part of being a journalist is not saying this is one view and this is the other. It's basically getting at the truth. And I'm going to zoom out a little bit from what my own faith may dictate, and just look at this from a journalistic lens. I'm sort of intrigued by the fact that Guru used the term secular, because I think that's exactly what sits with odds about what we're seeing at this point. Secular is very much in the Constitution of India, which would prompt one to question whether the Prime Minister of a country should be associated with what is quite clearly the greatest sort of political religious event of our time, certainly in our country. And look, Ruchir, I mean, as Guru pointed out as well, given the buzz around it, given the timelines, we're clearly looking at an election-facing event. Let's be clear about that. For a lot of people, this is not a religious temple, this is a political temple. That's one part of it. The second part of it is that, just again, as a journalist, I would also ask the question, if the basic concept here is that it's a tremendous event, religion, for the religion, one would ask why there is so much hesitation and concern amongst the Shankaracharyas. For anyone who's aware of that aspect for it, they are the supreme authorities of the Hindu scriptures. There are four Shankaracharyas, one of whom has gone on record in interviews to say, we don't think this is appropriate. We don't think this is the time to be, conducting this particular part of the ceremonies. The temple is not ready. Our advice, and our strong advice, is to hold on. Also saying we're not criticizing the prime minister or the government in power. We're just saying it's not appropriate at this point. So there's two parts to it. As a journalist, the two questions I would ask. There's two other quick points I want to make, because I know we're trying to compress, our conversations. One is that I'm a bit disappointed by the response of the key opposition party at this point. I think, you have to take a stand this way or that. Either you recognize it and call it a political project, or you say, it isn't. You can't sort of be waffling, and I think that waffling is in a way not constructive to what we're trying to discuss over here. And finally, Ruchir, I want to make the point about, just going back to what Manu said at the start on the role of sort of media. I'm actually I'm deeply disappointed about the role of journalism and the media at this point. I mean, the way this particular event is being covered, there are images of vans that are going to cover the event with sort of stickers on them saying "Mandir wahi banaya hai." Uh, is this the role of a journalistic, industry, to sort of do something like that, to obliterate history? I've seen sort of, interviews happening with journalists who covered the 6th December event, many years back, talking about how they're amazed at this event now, completely obliterating, sorry, the history of what occurred. Something occurred, and it was, deeply painful, and lives were lost, and riots happened. This is a reality, and I'm not getting into the religious side of it. I'm just saying, as journalists, I think it's quite shameful that we choose to completely erase history, and pretend like, nothing has happened, that this is not built on pain, and that there's not sort of legal questions as well, which I'm sure Manu will point to. But let me pause there.
Manu.
I will. And I think we've always seen that, the victors write and rewrite history in a way that suits them the best. And of course, there was a legal dispute which was built on the backdrop, or which was built on the foundation of some of the incidents that happened in the early 90s, culminating on, I think, December 6th, 1992, the demolition of the Babri Masjid. Now, of course, the courts of the country have held in one manner, and that is something now being used, according to me, to rewrite history, or as Mitali has put it, delete or alter or abridge parts of history in a way that suits the present narrative. So now that part is how politics is played out. Regardless of the regime, regardless of the country, I think politically that is something that media and other critiques of any government must point fingers and make sure that that is written. And of course, what the media is doing today is, I think, quite the opposite. Now, going back to the constitution, going back to the preamble, and of course, we have characterized our country as a secular country, and that is something that all of us agree upon. Now, what does that actually mean? It means that there is no state endorsed religion, right? Now, at this moment is where there is a particular problem. While we all agree that this is something that is, Ayodhya as such is a private temple, in a sense, built by constructed by a private trust, and the government per se has no direct relationship, but there is a tacit sort of understanding by the presence and by the I guess the participation and the leadership of the prime minister, who is also the undisputed leader of the political party, but at the same time also a key member of this particular temple. Now, I ask, should a political elected leader express his or her faith in a manner that is um, similar to the way it is being done in this particular situation? This is not the first time that this is being done. In fact, going back, I think almost 5 to 6 years, at around the time of the verdict, or just before that, Mr. Modi, when he was in Uttar Pradesh, not far from Ayodhya, or not far from the place where the temple is being constructed, he, started a public meeting with Jai Shri Ram. Now, there are political slogans, but as an elected government leader, are you allowed to sloganeer in a manner that shows your religion, but also um, creates doubt in the minds of people whether that the government that you lead is actually secular? And by secular, again, we mean that going beyond the fact that the state does not endorse a religion, there is also an arm's length or a healthy distance between the state, those who govern the state, and religion. But this is not just a problem that we see in Ayodhya. Every government project, let us say, that is initiated by the union or a state government, if there is a puja done by a particular leader of a faith or a priest of a particular faith, whatever that faith might be, is that fair? Is that ensuring that we are in fact a secular government? Or is that making sure that people from other faiths, whichever other faiths that might be neglected by a particular puja, are actually feeling excluded, which of course is not allowed by the constitution? Of course, I like the framing of the issue that Guru and others have brought in around, civilizational consciousness, which then goes into the question of how do we define our civilization? So I use this opportunity to try and ask people to understand, how do you define Indian civilization? Is it defined from a perspective of a religion? Is it defined from 4 or 5 waves of migration, going back 60,000 years? As most scientists now agree, we are a multi-source civilization, meaning we have come from out of Africa from 70,000 years ago through numerous waves, leading up to the last wave around 2,500 years ago. So that is really where I think the question today is, according to me, the Bharatiya Janata Party and its leadership very, very tactfully moving this from a religiously polarizing issue to one around civilizational consciousness, right? And I think that is something we as Indians of today have to really look at, whether we believe that Hinduism is a way of life or whether we even believe in any particular religion or not. We need to understand where we stand as a civilization and what we are defining as a civilization. Because my reading is that the BJP is using this to define the civilization from one of cultural and religious nationalism. And I think that, as Mitali said, and I think is quite obvious, is what helps them drive their election machinery forward, if not only for 2024, but for the next many election cycles ahead.
I think one of the things I just want to say out loud is, and this is me in Guru's camp, I don't think religion and politics have been separate anywhere in the world for at least like all history I read. So I think I understand why BJP is going to use this for electioneering. I can't imagine if Congress was in power, they wouldn't either. I imagine that all political parties, to get the votes, they will use religion to like bring forward the votes that they want. But that's sort of my view on this. Guru, why don't, I mean, especially given that you set the tone, I'd love for you to respond.
No, I think a couple of objections and pointed questions, and very like intellectually challenging as well, which I think is appropriate and has been one of the core objectives behind this project. So the definition of secularism is something which has been a hotly contested theater since our independence. And like Manu said, that this is not the first time, and this is not the first time that a consecration ceremony is happening in an incomplete temple premises. K.M. Munshi, in one of his monographs, has written that, and again, that was a subject of controversy back then as well, when the first president of India, Dr. Rajendra Prasad, went ahead and participated in the Somnath temple ceremony, to which the then Honorable Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru objected to. But regardless, he went. So, in a way, what exactly has been the definition of secularism? And another very interesting point with respect to this is mixing of religion and politics. The first person, in my limited opinion, and I think I could be wrong, who tried this experiment of mixing religion and politics was Mahatma Gandhi. Mahatma Gandhi's last words were "Hey Ram," and his ideas is, "My experiments with truth is deeply ingrained, deeply assimilated into his religious views as well." And I think that was one of the areas of disagreement where he and Dr. Ambedkar, uh, the discussion that led to Pune Pact was something that is very intense and very interesting as well. But I have a very fundamental problem with this observation that the present government or the present regime is or has been using religion as a vehicle to return to power or to make electoral gains as well. I think if we look at the data, and which I think is available in the public domain as well, that 40% more Muslim women, their enrollment rate in higher education institution has like gone up, fundamentally increased. We have seen the conversation and representation of Pasmanda Muslims. I think the backward sections among the Muslims, for the first time, we are abrogation of Article 370 for that matter was so discriminatory for the women of Jammu and Kashmir, for the backward segments of Jammu and Kashmir, and the conversation on triple talaq as well. So the definition of secularism is something which has to be a very uh, a very nuanced perspective is required, and there is no one definition of secularism. In Hindi, when we say what is dharma nirpeksh and what is panth nirpeksh, so if you look at the Constituent Assembly debates, there are like massive instances available on the usage of the term panth nirpeksh or dharma nirpeksh. Now, when I say dharma, even the loose translation of the word dharma would not be religion in English. And the Manu would know the slogan of Supreme Court is Yato Dharmstato Jaya. Dharma, victory will be achieved by those who follow dharma. And the slogan behind the Speaker of Lok Sabha is Dharm Chakra Paravartanai. Change alone is changeless. So dharma and panth are two very fundamental different things when we speak of secularism. We have had instances when prime ministers of India, I remember very categorically, again, this is available on YouTube in 2007 while addressing a conclave of National Minorities Commission. Then Prime Minister Manmohan Singh said that the first right over the resources of this country is is for the minorities and particularly the Muslim minorities. So this is a very shaky ground when we say that religion and politics has to be uh, sort of avoided, or one party or the other party has been using religion as a vehicle to achieve power, because it has changed. If you look at the sheer data, if you look at the sheer voting percentages, and when we say that religion has been driving our elections, I think I have a very fundamental problem with this, because by saying that, we are questioning the wisdom of the Indian public, the wisdom of the Indian voter. And the Indian voter, they are much more smart. They have evolved over time, and only religion can play a some minor role, but religion cannot be the sole exclusive pivotal factor determining your voting behavior. There are many other things that has seen, like if you look at the data 2014 and 2019, the sheer vote percentage, even in the Muslim dominated area, they are also voting, their preference of voting has changed. So religion and politics could be a subject of conversation, but I don't necessarily agree with this position or this hypothesis that religion as a vehicle to achieve electoral gains. Now, that is something which I have a fundamental problem with, because that has been an experiment that has been in operation for quite some time. The role of media is something which, again, like there are hundreds of examples, and I don't want to do whataboutery here that newspapers were banned, and like we all very well categorically remember the Radia tapes when portfolios were allocated on the behest of some journalists. So there is that media is something which can be a subject of different debate, but for this purpose, I think we should give that liberty to media. Whatever media is doing is their own domain, and how much intervention should any dispensation or influence should any dispensation have over the media is something that can be discussed at a later stage. Yeah.
I think if media was doing their job well, I don't think we would be doing this. And it will probably come up a few times again and again. Also, the temple will come up again and again. But before we wrap up the topic, like Mitali, Manu, do you have any last words?
And I just want to say, I think Guru's taken us on a bit of a world trip where we've done the temple, but then also jumped onto education and then reached voters. So I think we should sort of stick with the topic. And I just wanted to say very quickly on the point that he made about Mahatma Gandhi. I'm sure Guru will remember one of his most early pieces where he himself said, "By Ram Rajya, I don't mean Hindu Raj. For me, Ram and Rahim are one and the same." So there's lots of ways of sort of looking at what has been said. I will still stand by my initial statement. And I want to wrap up quickly so there's time for Manu to speak as well, which is that this is a religious political project. And on the point you made, Ruchir, I can't think in recent memory of a prime minister being associated with a religious project which is so clearly towards one majority section versus the other. You point me to it, but I'd be interested to see that. Manu.
No, I'm good, Ruchir. I think I'm ready to move on to the next one. I afraid we will hear this temple coming up in numerous other conversations. I don't think we have even scratched the surface of what we need to talk about here. But
Yeah.
I'm happy to continue on to the next topic, because I think the question of religion and politics is going to be something that opponents of BJP are going to always use to beat the BJP or the present dispensation with. And I think BJP will have very many ways to sort of say that that is not the case, right? And I think we will see this as a defining feature of many conversations wherever the government is being sort of taken to task. But I do think, let me take the liberty, which is so you don't have to do this. I think another issue that we have seen over the last few years is the evolution, if you can call it that, of Indian foreign policy. Now, I actually don't understand, and let me start with a question. What is our present foreign policy outlook? I know the Nehruvian era, the early Indian years, we saw the development of the non-aligned movement, right? And of course, the world has changed substantially. That I don't think we can even say that a policy that was made for the 70s or the 80s should be applicable now. But if I look around our neighborhood today, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka, and now Maldives have all sort of, in some way or the other, slipped through our hands like sand. What has happened? Why has our neighborhood, in a sense, lost touch with us? Why have we not failed to read our neighborhood sentiment? This is something I've wondered. I actually don't know what is the defining feature of our country's foreign policy, given that we hosted the G20, where we hosted some of the largest countries and their leaders. But also, is that just a bit of show and bluster? Did we not actually make tangible foreign policy advancements? Because soon thereafter, we saw issues cropping up. There was Canada, there was United States, which sort of went, put India in a corner versus some of the other so-called Western democracies. And then the last 2 years, two of the major foreign policy issues, according to me, have been Ukraine and now Gaza. And I still do not know, as somebody who watches the news, and I'd love to hear from Guru, Mitali, and you, because you're my sort of barometer for all things India, outside India. Uh, what has been India's defining sort of foreign policy role or perspective or outlook? And is there something like a thread that you can find? Because I don't think just positioning our prime minister as a global leader, or Vishwa Guru is the word they've used, is foreign policy outlook, right? There must be something more than that. So what is it? Maybe we'll take Ruchir first, because he's a part of the diaspora here.
It's interesting because the non-aligned movement was so defining for such a long time that when India joined the Quad or some of these other groupings, the I2U2 and so on, that was the first time I actually felt like India was starting to take a position in the foreign policy stage. And I think if China hadn't overplayed its hand in testing our borders, I don't think India would have taken that position. So in my mind, a lot of the reaction that we are seeing now is a real counter to China testing both the borders and the region. The Maldives story, the Pakistan story, so much of our relationships today, the way I see them, are a counterbalance to where China is. So us being closer to the US, our stronger relationships with the Middle East, and so on and so forth. Are we doing a bad job or a good job? I think the way I think about it is, at least we have sensible people like the Foreign Minister Jaishankar in where he is. Not necessarily because it's mainly because of his experience, mainly because the person has actually seen the world from India's eyes and is sort of really well equipped to think about the tools available. But I do agree in that the we should be doing everything we can to not lose our neighbors and our friends. And I think the Maldives situation is a little bit disappointing because it is such a strategic post in the Indian Ocean, and we don't want China to find new homes like Sri Lanka or Maldives in this case. So it's a little bit sad. One thing I will say is the accidental outcome is that our tourism sector gets a real boost, and that's not a bad thing. I think the tweet storm that has been run, maybe coordinated or not coordinated, hopefully we do see a lot more people going to our own destinations.
Richard, I
Guru,
want to come in and because I'm not a foreign policy expert, but I want to take on some of what you're saying. The first thing is that I think I want to layer Manu's question about foreign policy with a more provocative question, which is that has party ideology become foreign policy? That's the question I'm asking, and that might be fine, but is that what it is? Were the comments that came in from some of the ministers in Maldives personally attacking the prime minister of another country okay? Absolutely not. I think that was inexcusable, and there's no sort of gray area over there.
That's
I think two things on what you said, Ruchir. One, the point that you made about China. I think we need to look at this also with sort of an economic lens, which is that what also happened when the president of Maldives visited Beijing was that he signed off on many agreements that decrease food dependence on India, agreements that decrease medical dependence on India. So we have to be a bit tactical as well when we're thinking about foreign policy and economic repercussions from there. And I just want to sort of take you on this point about tourism, Ruchir, which is, I mean, I feel like this is sort of, and I don't know if it's an intended consequence of foreign policy snowballing into this social media SHIT storm. And that's exactly what happened, right? Because there were pictures of Lakshadweep, and then it said, well, go to hell, Maldives, everybody go to Lakshadweep. I mean, Maldives has 1,200 islands, it's 9,000 square kilometers. Lakshadweep has a land area measuring 32 square kilometers. Do we have tourism carrying capacity? What happens when you get these ships and cruise liners in? You are really clued into climate, Ruchir. So, what happens with the dredging and the desilting? And, what are we creating in a space like Lakshadweep? And are we ready to create that kind of tourism infrastructure there? Is the space ready for it? I think I have sort of some offshoot questions that came off from this foreign policy snowballing. So I don't know if you want to take that on, Ruchir, or we want
I
to.
just take the
Yeah,
Lakshadweep part.
yeah,
Like,
go
and
on.
I was very conscious in the fact that I didn't say Lakshadweep, I said Indian tourism. I of course Lakshadweep is
I
not
mean,
ready,
we
but I
were
did
not going to sort of swap up Maldives for, I
no.
don't know,
I mean, this is an
Hyderabad.
anecdote. This is an
Yeah.
anecdotal example, but I was talking to a family member, and they were like, the thing about Maldives is I actually realized I don't do enough in India, so I should do more in India. Like, I think that's what I mean. Like, it just it brought that to the forefront that we should see more of our own country. That's all I meant.
Okay.
So
Guru, we
the
saved this
next
for
time,
the best for the. Sorry, Manu.
sorry, Guru, before you speak, I just want to say the next time, Richard, according to you, we have a social media fight with Switzerland that should increase like our tourism in Gulmarg, or you know, or Italy and Mumbai or whatever. But yeah, so Guru, I think you need to tell us this, right? Because one of the defining moments of the Prime Minister Modi's first year was his visit to Pakistan. I think nobody expected him to turn up in Islamabad and spend time with Nawaz Sharif, but he did that. And now again, not just Pakistan, but we see that we are losing friends in the neighborhood. Is this by design, or is there a larger plan here that we are not seeing?
Uh, I won't comment on like whether what defines our foreign policy or this is the defining moment. But one thing I'm pretty sure that this podcast would definitely take my art of listening to newer levels, and which I think is a very good thing for me. But it's very important, Ruchir, that foreign policy, initially, a lot of questions were raised. A lot of curiosity was that how would the present prime minister, who has served as the chief minister of Gujarat, like foreign policy would be his weak spot. People said it. But the first thing we saw that the swearing in the neighborhood that was just brought up, we saw the heads of states from neighborhood coming in and actively participating in that swearing in ceremony. That came as a great amount of surprise. But categorically, I think India first, if we can say that, how we put our interest first, because in terms of foreign policy and from whatever limited understanding I have, is that, and this applies to neighborhood, this applies to other areas as well, that there are no permanent friends, there are no permanent enemies, but there are permanent interests. And today I'm pretty sure that India is in a position to secure its interest. I think only a couple of days ago, the foreign minister was in Iran, which is having a problem with the neighborhood. And before that, he was in Russia having a conversation with Putin. Prime Minister Modi and President Putin had a conversation as well. So, not by non alignment, what exactly do we mean? Are we putting our interest first? I was in the UK recently at the same time as Manu, and it was a barrage of questions were by the foreign department of the government of UK, that what is your position? Why are you not taking a position? Ukraine? Why are you not supporting Ukraine? So that is something which sort of defines our foreign policy, that the respect for the Indian autonomy, the element of Indian autonomy has definitely gone up, and this is backed by solid work. We saw number of crises in the last 10 years: the Yemen crisis, the crisis in Ukraine, the COVID crisis, and the evacuation. The sheer evacuation was so wonderfully executed. That is something which can be a subject of PhD or a subject of foreign policy thesis. In terms of COVID diplomacy, we saw President Trump reaching out, President of Brazil reaching out for hydroxychloroquine, if I'm not mistaken. In terms of again, like I'm not here, like the conversation could be sort of a shift when I'm not here to speak about our achievements of foreign policy, but in a sense, what has defined our foreign policy. We saw the head of state of Papua New Guinea greeting the Honorable Prime Minister. We saw for the first time G20 happening at such a, in fact, it was like Manu put it, that the show was so grand, the show was so huge that the next host, Brazil, they were sort of surprised. They were sort of taking it as a challenge that whether are we going to put a similar show as well or not. Having African Union as a permanent member of G20, that is something which was the most important takeaway for me as a student of politics, for me as a student of foreign policy, that African nations who were initially not given table at the place at the high table, they were recognized and they were officially welcomed as a permanent member. We saw in the initial few years of our foreign policy, International Day of Yoga being taken up globally. And yoga, how can yoga be an instrument or an element of soft power diplomacy for India? We saw International Year of Millets being taken globally. And one very interesting anecdote that I recall was listening to one of the speeches of the foreign minister. He said that in one of the meetings at UNGA, the Jamaican foreign minister reached out to the Indian foreign minister and said that I'm carrying that COVID vaccine in my heart. So a lot has changed. The perception of India, the perception of Indians across have undergone a fundamental transformation. We are among the five most powerful economies, aiming to be three most powerful economies in the coming years. So definitely, and with respect to Maldives or with respect to foreign policy, I think with the advent of social media, the entire domain of policy, foreign policy, non-foreign policy, has gotten democratized. It is beyond our control, and a lot is being done. Whether government had any role to play or not, and Mitali had a very interesting question: that is the party ideology now the foreign policy? So I think party ideology is something that can definitely, foreign policy is defined by your interest, and whatever your interest in the present scenario, in the present circumstances, will definitely, the ruling party will definitely have a sort of view, a sort of because in terms of internal security, which can be argued both ways, that barring Jammu and Kashmir, there has been no major terror incident. Like I was listening to one of the observation of a business tycoon from Mumbai. They said that at the inauguration of the Atal Setu, the Nava Seva Setu, which is again a marvel, that living in Mumbai was a threat like 10 years ago, and now the surgical strike. And with respect to neighborhood, I don't particularly think that there has been an incommunicado state. The with Pakistan as well, and with Pakistan, I can share that at the DGMO level, the at the diplomatic level, the interaction is very much happening. It's just that India has started realizing its own value, its own autonomy, and India first. Two very simple words that sort of defines the nature of our foreign policy.
Guru, I
That
just
could
want to
go on
quickly
forever.
say, if you can't trust
I was
politicians,
gonna wrap up.
certainly not trust businessmen who say that they feel safe or unsafe. So, just in that list of people to take with a pinch of salt, I would definitely add business people, Guru, which is not sort of not about one party line or
And you are qualified as a business journalist yourself, Mitali. I really value your opinion on that.
Um, I am going to have to end it there. That's all we have time for, folks. The end of our first episode. Like I said at the beginning, this is an experiment. We may be doing a good job, we may be doing a bad job. We'd love to hear from you on your thoughts on how we can do this better. We have a lot to learn and probably create opportunities both of agreement and disagreements. Please share your feedback at indiadialoguepodcast@gmail.com or find us on X or other podcast channels. The podcast is at TID_podcast on X.com, formerly Twitter, or India Dialogue Podcast on YouTube. Guru's at Guru Prakash. Manu is at Manuraj1983. Mitali is at Mitali Live. I am at Ruchir_P. Thank you for being with us. We look forward to seeing you again in a week.